experts were all proven wrong.
Do you see the message that you're sending?
Evidence the system is working.
We continue to expose the truth.
That is where the story begins.
Chief of Staff John Kelly, you do not want to miss that. We're excited about it. Brett?
Thanks for the tease, Kimberly.
You're welcome.
This is a Fox News Alert. I'm Bret Baier in Washington. As mentioned, we will talk live and in-depth with White House Chief of Staff John Kelly in just a few moments. First up, President Trump sticking to his guns on immigration amid the threat of a government shutdown. The federal government is set to shut down, at least partially, Friday night if negotiations don't continue to come up with a temporary spending bill. They're going right down to the wire. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts starts us off tonight with the latest on DACA and how that fits in. Good evening, John.
Brett, good evening to you. And tonight, the White House is confident it can get a deal on a temporary spending measure, and it's throwing its support behind the Republican measure to come out of the House. But on DACA, the prospect of a deal is beginning to look very bleak.
It was a rare moment of harmony on Capitol Hill today. President Trump paying tribute to a lion of American politics, former Kansas Senator Bob Dole.
You're a friend. You are a patriot, a hero, a leader, and today you have become a recipient of the Congressional Gold Medal.
But outside the Grand Rotunda, the bickering and deal-making continued over a plan to give legal status to the so-called Dreamers. The Senate Majority Leader complaining he has no idea what the president wants.
He's not yet indicated what measure he's willing to sign. As soon as we figure out what he is for, then I would be convinced that we were not just spinning our wheels.
Democrats insist the president is asking for too much.
I think the president showed compassion, which he hasn't shown so far. I think if the president showed empathy, which he hasn't shown so far, and leadership, we could get this done.
White House officials complain Democrats are exploiting a profanity-laced meeting in the Oval Office last week to stick it to the president.
So here we are having all this drama and discussion about what he said, she said, and we're not focused on the reality that there are terrorists trying to get into our country every day, and we're trying to fix chain migration and the lottery visa program to make sure our country is safe and secure.
The White House Chief of Staff has taken the lead in negotiations to find a deal, meeting today with the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, also huddling with the so-called Gang of Four, McCarthy, Hoyer, Cornyn, and Durbin. Left out of the talks, South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, who sources say really ticked off Kelly and the president by trying to sell them a DACA deal that fell well short of what President Trump asked for.
I will tell General Kelly that the proposals you made are not in the realm of possibility, that you want comprehensive immigration reform on the border for DACA. You're not going to get that.
The president also found himself at odds today with Arizona Senator Jeff Flake, who again took to the Senate floor to denounce President Trump, this time over his attitude toward the media.
Mr. President, it is a testament to the condition of our democracy that our own president uses words infamously spoken by Joseph Stalin to describe his enemies.
The White House, which was making plans to release President Trump's so-called fake news awards, took a blowtorch to Flake.
He went to Cuba a few weeks ago and served as a mouthpiece for the oppressive Cuban government. He's not criticizing the president because he's against oppression. He's criticizing the president because he has terrible poll numbers.
Flake's criticism was matched by fellow Arizonan John McCain, who excoriated the idea of fake news awards in an op-ed writing, quote, "Whether Trump knows it or not, these efforts are being closely watched by foreign leaders who are already using his words as cover as they silence and shutter one of the key pillars of democracy."
There was some consternation at the White House today about these fake news awards, what they were all about, and whether the timing, given the recent controversies emanating from here, might not be good. But the press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, said this afternoon she's looking forward to them, and we should get word soon. Brett?
We'll see. John Roberts live on the North Lawn. John, thanks. Let's get an update where we are right now in the budget and shutdown talks. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel on Capitol Hill tonight. Good evening, Mike.
Brett, good evening. The clock is becoming a factor with the government due to run out of money late night Friday night. The offer on the table is a short-term continuing resolution that would fund the government through February 16th. It would also reauthorize the Children's Health Insurance Program for 6 years. It would delay some Obamacare taxes. Some concerns are this would be the fourth stopgap measure since last October, plus the impact a continuing resolution has on the military. Democrats still want a deal for so-called dreamers now, and they're starting the blame game while Republicans say DACA this week is a fake deadline.
Real deadlines are occurring this Friday. And the real deadlines that occur this Friday are our men and women in uniform and children's health insurance in many states that will run out of money.
If, God forbid, there's a shutdown, it will fall on the majority leader's shoulders and the president's shoulders. We all know what the president has said. He wants a shutdown.
But the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee says defense funding is being held hostage at a critical time.
They can't train for what's coming. They can only do the training for what's been. So it hurts the military every single day.
Sources suggest in the end it will be hard for Democrats on the ballot this year to vote against that children's health insurance extension. Brett?
Mike Emanuel live on the Hill. Mike, thanks. Apple is citing the new tax laws as one of the reasons behind its decision to commit another $350 billion to the U.S. economy over the next 5 years. That includes a new corporate campus, the hiring of 20,000 workers, and the repatriation of $250 billion in offshore cash. The markets like that today. Stocks surged again with record highs across the board. The Dow jumping 323, the seventh record close of 2018. The S&P 500 gained 25. The Nasdaq was up 75, both breaking records for the 9th time this year. Former White House Chief Strategist Steve Bannon has agreed to talk to the special counsel on the Russia investigation. That's big news after Bannon's refusal to answer questions from a House panel yesterday. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is here to tell us what changed. Good evening, Catherine.
Thank you, Brett. The agreement allows Bannon to avoid the grand jury and take questions from prosecutors. The president's former chief strategist is expected on Capitol Hill for a second day of testimony after the administration told him not to answer questions about the transition or his time at the White House. Press Secretary Sarah Sanders confirmed today that Bannon's lawyer was on the phone with the White House relaying questions in real time. Sanders said it was not out of the ordinary.
It's not just isolated to this instance. Executive privilege is something that goes back decades because it's something that needs to be protected, whether it's during this administration or 20 years from now. We want to make sure we follow the process and the precedent, and that's all that's taking place here.
Yesterday's 12-hour session escalated to the point that Bannon was issued a subpoena on the spot. He did not take the fifth, but still refused to answer questions and told lawmakers to work out the impasse with the White House. The committee's senior Democrat tonight cried foul.
We as an investigative committee cannot allow that to become the routine, to allow witnesses to decide when and where they're willing to answer questions.
Democrats want answers about the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting with Russian nationals that included the president's son, son-in-law, former campaign chairman, among others, and why Bannon called it treasonous. Republicans are equally frustrated.
Keep in mind, the president and some of his supporters want Congress to hurry up and conclude these investigations. So do I. The best way to do that is to instruct witnesses to answer our questions instead of going through this charade of executive privilege.
The president's former campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, is now in his fourth hour of closed-door testimony in front of the same House committee. He promised full cooperation. Former FBI Director James Comey's chief of staff, Jim Rybicki, is also scheduled to appear on the Hill tomorrow. Rybicki was copied on the May 2016 draft statement recommending against criminal charges in the Clinton email case. Brett.
Catherine, thank you. Let's get the inside story on all of these topics. White House Chief of Staff John Kelly joins us now for a Fox News exclusive tonight. Thank you, sir, for being here.
Brett, thanks.
First, as you sit here, are you confident the administration and congressional leadership has the votes for a short-term funding to avoid a government shutdown Friday?
I spent a fair amount of time on the Hill today speaking to members of Congress, both sides of the aisle, and frankly, both sides of the Hill, and it would seem that they have the votes to continue funding the military, take care of the child health care issue, and perhaps some other things. So as I understand it, they have the votes, and they're fairly confident.
It's not really what you wanted, but that's what...
No, I mean, the CR is getting in the way of an awful lot of things, but they are the reality of life in Washington.
Your time on the Hill today got some headlines. The Washington Post has a story. It says Kelly calls some of Trump's campaign pledges on immigration wall uninformed, meeting attendees say. White House Chief of Staff John Kelly told Democratic lawmakers Wednesday the United States will never construct a physical wall along the entire stretch of the U.S.-Mexico border, and that some of President Trump's campaign promises on immigration were uninformed. Comments put Kelly at odds with Trump, who repeatedly said during his presidential campaign that he would build a border wall that Mexico would pay for, not the U.S. taxpayers. Quote, concrete wall would be good only certain places, adding, saying manpower and drone technology should suffice in some parts. Kelly also saying that there will be no wall that Mexico will pay for. Your response to that?
Well, I met at my request today with the House Hispanic Caucus. I've done that 3 other times when I was at DHS. Met with them today and had a discussion about a range of issues. I was mostly listening because I've heard them so many other times, and they know what the administration perspective is. But in any event, as we talked about things, where this president is and how much he wants to deal with this DACA issue and take it away. I told him that, there's been an evolutionary process that this president has gone through as a campaign, and I pointed out to all of the members that were in the room that they all say things during the course of campaigns that may or may not be fully informed. But this president, if you've seen what he's done, he has changed the way he's looked at a number of things. He's adjusted the way he's looked at the South Asia strategy, Afghanistan. He's very definitely changed his attitude towards the DACA issue. And even the wall, once we briefed him when I was at DHS and told him that the real experts on defending the southwest border, the Customs and Border Protection men and women came in, did a survey of the border. There are places where hydrographically, geographically, a wall would not be realistic. There are other parts of the southwest border that are so wild and untamed that there is no traffic that goes through them. There's other places, we think about 800 miles additional wall to include the 600 that are already in place. The fencing would suffice. So he has evolved in the way he's looked at things. Campaign to governing are 2 different things, and this president is very, very, very flexible in terms of what is within the realm of the possible.
And Mexico's not going to pay.
That we have some ideas on how things like visa fees, renegotiation on NAFTA and what that would mean to our economy. So in one way or another, it's possible that we could get the revenue from Mexico, but not directly from their government.
The reason you're at this point with Congress is because this bigger funding DACA border security deal never came through. Let me take you back to Tuesday, that bipartisan meeting at the White House, and then what Senator Graham is saying since.
You folks are going to have to come up with a solution. And if you do, I'm going to sign that solution. I'll take the heat. I don't care.
Those who think that we're going to get away as Republicans with getting all we want on defense now, and we'll deal with the kids later, the DREAM Act population, closer to March 5th when their back's against the wall. That is nuts.
Somehow by 12 o'clock on Thursday, something happened, and I don't think he was well served by his staff. I think General Kelly's a fine man, but he's also part of the staff.
So your reaction to that, let's go through the TikTok on Thursday. What happens?
Well, I would tell you, first of all, that what I'm about to describe to you is the process I put in place when I became the Chief of Staff, to make sure that the President of the United States is informed across the spectrum of an issue, and he hears both sides of the story, pros and cons, and everything in between. There was an early morning phone call from one of the senators that said that I was conferenced in on, that said that they had come.
Durbin calls.
They had come with a solution. And the president was ecstatic. He said, we've got money for the wall, we've got the various other things that the president is interested in, the end of chain or family-based migration, and the end of the visa lottery and money for the wall. The president was thrilled, invited them over. So I then called other members of the Senate, because I was surprised at how fast this was happening, other members of the Senate that are involved in this whole process, and they were completely uninformed that there had been a bipartisan initiative led by both Senators Durbin and Graham, apparently. They were uninformed of that, and these are men that have been informed or have been involved in this process. So I then went over to the Hill to talk to someone who's been a friend for 20 years and remains a friend, Senator Graham. I knew him in the House when he was a freshman and all the way up to this point. Got his impression of what this deal was. But it was clear to me that, again, it was bipartisan, no doubt, but it was from a kind of a focus group of bipartisan senators. I then went over to the House side to talk to McCarthy, Congressman McCarthy, Congressman Goodlatte, and the Speaker to find out if they had been involved in this process. They had not been. So at that point, again, I had two senators coming over with what I would characterize as a possible solution to the DACA issue, but it certainly occupies one end of the spectrum. So the president then asked that we invite some other senators and members of the House to come over. The
president asked for that.
He asked for that. And again, it's how I now force the staff to do business. I don't want the president to hear one side of a story. The president likes to talk about issues. He likes to hear everyone's side. He prefers, or not prefers, but he certainly enjoys the intellectual discussion and wants people to raise issues that perhaps are issues that he doesn't believe in.
So does he decide it's a bad deal once he starts hearing the details?
Well, in the course of the conversation, he said, well, this is certainly, something we can talk about, but this is not what I had in mind, but it's a start point, and we can talk about it, just like Mr. Goodlatte, who was there. He has a proposed bill that is a great start point to talk about. So this begins the process. I went over to the Hill today, as you indicate, to talk to the Hispanic caucus, and then had a small group meeting with Senator Durbin and Steny Hoyer on the Democratic side, and the leader of the Hispanic caucus was there on their side as well, Senator Cornyn, and Congressman McCarthy, and had a great conversation, and this will lead eventually to, I believe, a solution to DACA.
All right, so just quickly some specifics. What does the president need to see on chain migration to bless a DACA deal?
The president sees that we should control that nuclear family, that people that qualify to come into the United States as immigrants, if they're married, of course, their wife would come in. If they have minor children, the minor children will come in. But not the parents, not the extended families. So that's where he is right now. This is, we can talk about this, but that's where he is.
And then is it a phase issue? Is it a phase 1, phase 2? And how much money does he need for the wall to bless this deal?
We think roughly 700 miles of wall, additional wall, to include, and also to include the fencing that's there. Some of it's only barriers to vehicle traffic. About $20 billion.
So that's not going to happen before Friday.
Unlikely, but again, there's two things, and I reminded the Hispanic caucus today. When I was at DHS, I pleaded with the United States Congress to come up with a solution because DACA was not going to stand the legal test. It didn't stand the legal test. We were sued. It had to go away. I then asked the president to give an additional 6 months to give the United States Congress an opportunity to sit down and work this out. Both sides of the aisle, both sides of the Hill. And we're right in the middle of that right now. The agreement or the extension ends on the 5th of March. There's no doubt in my mind there's going to be a deal, so long as men and women on both sides are willing to talk.
All right, a couple other things. We asked people on social media to weigh in if they had questions. One person, Mark, at Texas Eyelid Doc, says, I would ask you if he ever discusses with the president how his random, unfiltered tweets step on his message, or have you given up?
As I've said many times, I was not put in this job to change the way the President of the United States does business. I was put in the job to make sure the staff process better informs him on a range of issues. He oftentimes asks me, hey, I'm thinking of reinforcing whatever the message is on that given period of time with a tweet. What do you think? And absolutely. Sometimes he doesn't ask me that. He doesn't have to ask me that. He is his own man in this regard, and he feels very, very strongly that he's able to reach the American people out in Peoria and Montana and in central Wyoming through his tweets, because he doesn't feel as though he gets a completely fair shake from the media.
Now, you've often said that your role is not to control President Trump. You're supposed to, deal with his schedule, the flow of information, not intervene. It's been reported that you did intervene recently following the tweet the president sent last week suggesting his opposition to Section 702 surveillance. An hour and a half later, another tweet seemed more in line with the administration policy. Is that correct? You intervened?
I spoke to the president about the issue. It's an important issue. It's the FISA reauthorization. Very, very important. Yep. Very, very important to law enforcement. He has strong feelings on personal privacy. Sent out the first tweet, sent out the second tweet. You went and talked to him. He and I talk constantly. Weekends, early mornings, late at night, we talk constantly. He bounces ideas off of me. I'm very proud of the fact that he respects my opinion. But again, he's the President of the United States. He's got his own way of doing business. But again, I see a man who is can change his mind when the facts and the data and the staff work and the conversation brings them to a different conclusion.
We've spent much of the last week hearing from various lawmakers and critics of the president saying that he is racist. Today, in a speech today, Arizona Republican Senator Jeff Flake, you heard some of it, said the president's description of the press as fake news is Stalinesque. Here's another piece.
Not only has the past year seen an American president borrow despotic language to refer to the free press, but it seems he has now, in turn, inspired dictators and authoritarians with his own language.
How do you respond to all that?
I think it's unfortunate that he would do that. I think he's completely wrong. It more than suggests to me well, I just think he's completely wrong. I think it's beneath him, but he is a United States senator and he has his opinions, and he can voice them any way he wants, I guess.
Former White House Chief Strategist Steve Bannon testified yesterday, didn't answer a lot of questions, refused to answer some before the House Intel Committee. Did the White House tell him to invoke executive privilege? No.
Steve has had very, very little contact with the White House since he left. I know Steve a little bit, not very well. He left the White House and has certainly never returned to the White House, and with the exception of a few phone calls here and there, very, very little contact with the White House. And I certainly have never spoke to him since he left.
This White House has seen a lot of turmoil, a lot of turnover, resignations, firings, a partial list here on the screen. A lot of folks. It's not what you usually see in an administration this early. How do you explain that?
I would tell you that it's very interesting. Every administration the first year or so has a fair amount of turmoil. I think that's fair to say. It is interesting to me as someone who has served on many, many staffs in my previous career that there's probably only one staff that I know of, certainly, that on the 19th of January in a given year is fully staffed up and functioning, and the next day they're all gone and there's new people in the job. And so I would tell you, as I said many times, campaigning is very, very different than governing. It's really, really hard work to govern at this level. And some people that were perhaps involved in the campaign didn't make that transition. I came to the job 6 months after this, almost 7 months after this administration took over. And I would tell you I won't comment before, but
which is a lot of that book that got a lot of coverage.
All of it. The day after I took over, we fundamentally focused on better staff work, stop this foolish backbiting leaking, which is all but stopped, and serve the president, because to serve him well, he succeeds. And whether you voted for him or not, whether you like him or not, if he succeeds, the nation succeeds. Look at the economy. Look at what's going on. If he fails, the nation fails.
Two quick things. North Korea seems like they've had negotiations. Obviously, the Olympics changes the equation. But if Kim Jong-un does not abandon his nuclear program, is the U.S. headed for war?
I hope not. But I don't think, this is one of those things that landed on this president's lap. It's been in the process for 25 years. We've kicked a can down the road. The problem at this point in time is there's no road left. We have to deal with this guy. He cannot have a deliverable atomic weapon that can reach the United States reliably. It just cannot be. Obviously, we'd much prefer, the president would much prefer to do this in alliance with every other nation of goodwill to convince this guy that it is not in his interest. But I believe we're out of road. There's no more place to kick this can.
Second interview in as many weeks, he wouldn't answer the question whether he's talked to Kim Jong-un. Has he?
He is. There are open channels, but I prefer not to comment on that. But there are a lot of people trying to help out here, and the president calls numerous national leaders, Chinese as an example, on a regular basis. Japan, Korea, others on a regular basis. Our ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, works that very, very hard and has gotten some great votes in the Security Council. But at the end of the day, this president is committed to ensuring the nation's safety.
Last thing, you have said that this is the toughest job you've ever had, tougher than being a combatant commander in Iraq. Are you in this for the long haul?
I am. This is not only the toughest job I've ever had, but it is, and I've done a lot of things in my life. This is the most important thing I've ever done in my life. I got no reason to be doing this other than my sense of service to the country. That's my number one motivation, always has been for my whole life. So no heroics here. Never wanted to ever work another regular job in my life. This ain't a regular job. But I am in this for the long haul. It is the most important thing I've ever done in my life, because if the administration fails, if the President of the United States is uninformed one time and makes the wrong decision, that's on me. And those decisions at his level are so critical that people's lives obviously depend on it. So I'm in for the long haul.
Well, thank you for your service, sir, and we appreciate your time tonight.
Thanks, Brett. Appreciate it.
Still ahead, why President Trump will lead a parade of top Republicans to campaign in a House district in Pennsylvania that he won by 20 points. But first, the former CIA officer who could be responsible for a major American intelligence failure.
The President's Fake News Awards. How will the mainstream media respond? Sean breaks down the big event with Michelle Malkin tonight on a must-see Hannity.
It's time to get smart about home security. Introducing Floodlight Cam by Ring, a motion-activated security light with an HD camera.
Don't even think about it.
That lets you know when anyone steps on your property. Illuminate every corner of your home with a ring of security. Smart enough to detect people and objects.
Hey, girls. Hi, Dad.
With Floodlight Cam, you can stop crime before it happens. Protecting your home has never been easier. Now that's security in a whole new light. Available at ring.com.
We are learning more tonight about a former CIA official now charged with keeping classified and top secret information and possibly inflicting incredible damage on American intelligence efforts. Here's correspondent Doug McElway.
It was here at Kennedy Airport on Monday that retired CIA agent Jerry Chun-Shing Lee was arrested after a flight from Hong Kong. He is charged with unauthorized possession of classified documents. Suspicions about Lee first arose in 2010 as the CIA's undercover network in China began drying up. Agents and covert informants were being rounded up.
When China caught these individuals, perhaps up to 20, they executed about a dozen of them. Some of them were executed publicly.
As early as 2012, Lee had come under U.S. investigation. The FBI learned he was flying from Hong Kong to Virginia. During a 3-day layover in Honolulu, FBI agents gained access to his hotel room and photographed 2 small notebooks that, quote, contained true names and phone numbers of assets and covert CIA employees, as well as the addresses of CIA facilities. With Chinese human intelligence assets severely compromised, the U.S. may now be partially blind. And U.S. authorities are also concerned with China's increasing influence in the U.S. A November report to Congress found that Chinese state media are not required to register as foreign agents, even though many of its representatives are suspected spies. And the Wall Street Journal reported Monday that U.S. counterintelligence officials warned White House advisors Ivanka Trump and husband Jared Kushner to steer clear of their close friend Wendy Deng Murdoch, the ex-wife of News Corp executive chairman Rupert Murdoch. She was a sponsor of a now-on-hold 12-acre garden at Washington's National Arboretum, a perfect high perch for electronic surveillance of the Capitol.
It means that you're able to vacuum up conversations, electronic emissions.
We reached out to Wendy Murdoch's representatives for comment. They did not respond, but they did tell the Wall Street Journal, quote, she has no knowledge of any FBI concerns relating to her associations. Brett?
Doug, thanks. Up next, why President Trump and the Republicans are going all in on a House special election in Pennsylvania, plus the panel on my interview with Chief of Staff John Kelly. Wall Street Journal said Daniels was paid $130,000 as part of a non-disclosure agreement 1 month before the 2016 presidential election. The White House and the GOP are pushing all their chips to the center of the table over what would normally be a fairly inconsequential special election in a safely Republican House district in Pennsylvania. Tonight, correspondent Molly Line tells us what's so special about this election.
Mexico. Very nice to meet you. The congressional seat in Pennsylvania's southwest corner is up for grabs. It's been in Republican hands for nearly 15 years. But with the recent loss in Alabama still smarting, the GOP is taking no chances. Vice President Pence and an array of cabinet members are expected to visit. And President Trump will hit the political battleground tomorrow, where he'll talk taxes and the economy. Joined during his visit by the Republican candidate, State Representative Rick Saccone, a full-throated Trump backer.
This is Trump country. People around here, people in the 18th District love President Trump.
Saccone touts his experience, 20 years in the Air Force, counterintelligence work, a Ph.D. in international affairs, and a year spent serving as a diplomat in North Korea, to argue he's the best fit to fill the vacancy, left by Congressman Tim Murphy, who resigned amid allegations he asked a woman with whom he was having an affair to terminate a pregnancy. But Democrats have a 70,000 voter registration edge here and are committed to flipping the seat.
People are ready for a real contest this time, and that's what we're going to give them.
33-year-old former federal prosecutor and Marine Corps veteran Connor Lamb is calling for fresh leadership in Washington and says he's willing to seek common ground with the president.
If he is going to do anything to help create jobs here in Western Pennsylvania and to help keep our people safe, I will work with him anytime.
The Cook Political Report changed its rating of the race from likely to lean Republican last month, giving Lamb supporters hope. But Super PAC cash has already put pro-Saccone advertising on local airwaves.
And we'll always put Pennsylvania first.
Recent history may favor a GOP victory, but Duquesne professor Kristen Allen argues
one win in a state like Pennsylvania, in a district like PA 18, might be just the impetus that the Democratic Party needs.
Voters here head to the polls on March 13th in what could prove to be an early test of the president's ability to hold his political ground. Brett?
Molly, thank you. In Wisconsin, a historically Republican district that voted overwhelmingly for President Trump in 2016 has elected a Democrat in a special state Senate election. Patty Schachner becomes the first Democrat to represent the 10th Senate district in at least 16 years. Schachner says her victory could be a bad sign for Republicans in Wisconsin statewide. Up next, the panel on my interview with White House Chief of Staff John Kelly and what's happening on Capitol Hill. First, what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 40 in Sacramento, as the defense attorney for a man accused of killing 2 Northern California sheriff's deputies says his client was high on methamphetamine and tried to kill himself before surrendering. Luis Brocamontes laughed during opening statements and said his only regret is that he killed just 2 officers. Fox 2 in Detroit, as hundreds of people in Michigan report what appeared to be a meteor shooting from the sky. Take a look at this. The fireball visible from Ontario to Missouri. Some Michigan residents say their houses shook, and the U.S. Geological Survey registered a magnitude 2 earthquake. No word yet exactly what it was. And this is a live look at Atlanta from Fox 5, our affiliate there. The big story there tonight, Georgia's governor orders state government offices closed for a second day tomorrow. Nathan Deal declared a state of emergency for 83 counties in Georgia because of winter weather. Officials are urging people to stay off the roads and avoid non-essential travel. That's tonight's live look.
Keeping government open is a basic function that should be a no-brainer, and yet Republicans struggle to find the support they need.
The president certainly doesn't want to shut down, and if one happens, I think you only have one place to look, and that's to the Democrats.
If, God forbid, there's a shutdown, it will fall on the majority leader's shoulders and the president's shoulders.
Well, this back and forth as the shutdown looms. White House Chief of Staff John Kelly says he believes, the administration believes, they have the votes on a short-term continuing resolution to keep the government open. Let's bring in our panel. Steve Hayes, editor-in-chief of the Weekly Standard, Molly Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist, and Michael Crowley, senior foreign affairs correspondent for Politico. Let's start there with this back and forth over funding, DACA, and the explanations there. Your thoughts, Steve?
Well, very interesting. I thought John Kelly was pretty clearly signaling that the White House is ready to make a deal. It might not be a deal that they can make this week, but he, in a sense, confirmed the Washington Post's account when you asked him about that the president was uninformed about the wall. He said that there wouldn't be a wall that stretches across the entire border. He allowed that there might be a virtual wall, and he confirmed that he told the Congressional Hispanic Caucus today that Mexico won't pay for the wall. Take a second and just think if the people who attended Donald Trump's rallies back a year and a half ago knew that 3 days before the one-year anniversary of his inauguration, that's what the chief of staff would have come on your show to say. I think it would be bracing. But it seems to me that he wants to send a signal, send a message the president's willing to deal on this.
Also seems that Senator Graham has lost a little favor in the White House, maybe.
Yes, bringing forth a bill that failed to in any way come close to doing what it needed to do probably wasn't Senator Graham's best move. But actually, you know, Donald Trump was saying a year ago that the wall wouldn't be the entire extent of the border. That was in the New York Times. I mean, he's kind of continuously said this. It's not like news that was broken. This is a moment in time when a lot needs to be accomplished. We need to move toward more merit-based immigration. There are problems with random visa lotteries. There are problems with chain migration. There is a complete lack of border security and enforcement. These are things that need to happen, and Donald Trump has signaled he's completely willing to work on a DACA fix, and also that these things need to happen. I mean, it seems like the real question is not whether Donald Trump is willing to negotiate, but whether Democrats are actually interested in a negotiation. This is an issue that can kind of keep their base very excited and keep them voting. They might not have the incentive to come to a fix as much as they say they do.
Michael?
Well, I was struck by Kelly's use of the word flexibility. I mean, he was. This was a picture of a White House that wants a deal, and Kelly was saying, "This is a president who's flexible. This is a president who's learning on the job." Evolved. He cited even the president's position on Afghanistan after Trump at times had said that we should leave Afghanistan, and then ended up endorsing a policy.
Which is true. I mean, that did happen.
And when he gave that speech, I think actually it was one of the more significant moments in his public rhetoric, at least, where he said it looks different from behind the desk when you're sitting here behind the desk. So I thought Kelly was significant. Kelly was trying to signal that sense of flexibility. I do think that Republicans are in a bind here. They control the House, the Senate, and the White House. And although we have heard Republicans saying that we're going to pin this on Democrats and Democrats are to blame, I think that is a tough argument to make with a public that doesn't follow the ins and outs of government very closely, but they know who controls the Congress and the White House.
I do want to play this soundbite from Mac Thornberry and Senator Blumenthal about the military.
Every day under these stopgap measures does damage to the military. If we could just vote on the merits of this issue, the military would be taken care of, and then we could go debate the other issue. But unfortunately, the military is being held hostage to these other political issues.
And I'll vote against a short-term spending bill. It holds hostage not only the dreamers, but also defense spending.
You know, Kelly acknowledged, Steve, that this is not the way they want to go, and they would like to see funding for the military. It seems like they're backed up against the corner here.
Yeah, look, this is a horrible way to run funding for the military. I mean, it affects readiness, it affects long-term planning, it affects basically every aspect of the U.S. military and how it conducts its affairs. You have a group of hawks in the Republican conference in the House of Representatives who wants a standalone vote simply on military spending for 1 year. You have hawks,
which would really be a political vote, because you'd be backing the Democrats into saying we don't want this funding for the military.
Yeah, I mean, it would certainly have political implications. They would argue that it would be a substantive vote. Let's take it out of the politics. Let's have a vote on this and this alone and pass it in the House of Representatives and then count on Democrats to deliver an additional 8 to 10 votes in the Senate. You know, I don't think that's an impossible task when you look at the number of Democrats who voted to reauthorize Section 702 of the FISA reauthorization. There were, 18, 19 Democrats who voted for that. I think you could get 9 or 10, 11 who would vote for it in the Senate.
But quickly, they're going to do a CR, and we're going to fight this battle in February?
Presumably, that's what has to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. And the good news for Republicans, you have a bunch of Democrats in Trump states who are worried about their reelection. So that is a way that Republicans can pull some Democrats to the Senate, center, at least in the Senate.
Okay, Steve Bannon, the investigation, North Korea, more topics when we come back.